"She's not cleared for combat," the instructor scoffed, looking at her dismissively. But she didn't say a word. Instead, she tied her hair into a tight bun, revealing a black ink tattoo at the base of her neck, a symbol earned by only a few soldiers in the entire U.S. Army. The colonel noticed the tattoo, and in that instant, everything changed. "Before I continue, let me ask, have you ever met someone who seemed so ordinary at first but turned out to be something extraordinary? A person with hidden abilities, quietly powerful? If stories like this, raw, real, and emotional, deserve to be shared, hit that subscribe button. These stories need to live on because the real heroes often don't seek the spotlight." The hot desert sun beat down on the concrete tarmac at Fort Rains. Dust swirled lazily between rows of parked helicopters, while the distant sound of twin rotors filled the air. The pungent scent of jet fuel, motor oil, and scorched sand mixed in the thick atmosphere. Near the edge of the flight line, beside a row of Apache helicopters, stood a woman alone. She wore gloves, her face shaded beneath a faded cap, a clipboard in one hand and a wrench in the other. Her name was Wren. To most, she was just another mechanic, a civilian contractor. Some didn't give her a second thought. She kept her hair tied up in a loose bun under her cap, her uniform slightly loose to combat the heat. She moved through hangars and workshops like a shadow, quiet, focused, unnoticed. Her name wasn't on any flight roster, and her file didn't list a combat badge. Her flight hours were marked as non-operational. The story was simple: she wasn't a pilot. She wasn't even allowed in the cockpit. But that was only the surface. Most of the junior officers at Fort Rains had no idea who Wren really was. They didn't bother asking. They assumed she was assigned to maintenance for some bureaucratic reason. A few had seen her working late on an Apache, shirt sleeves rolled up, arms smeared with grease. They'd think, wasted talent, and move on. But if they'd paid closer attention, they might have noticed something. They might have seen the way she worked on the Apache, not like someone simply maintaining it, but like someone who knew exactly what the machine could do. Inside the operations building, the air was cool and sterile. Monitors blinked with flight schedules and weather updates. A group of flight school graduates stood near the vending machines, chatting quietly. "Check this out," one of them muttered, nodding toward the door as Wren entered. "That's the girl who keeps hanging around the flight sim bay." "Think she's trying to be one of us?" another chuckled. "She's maintenance, just cleaning the joysticks," someone else laughed. Wren didn't even glance in their direction. She walked past them, purposeful and confident, vanishing down the hallway toward the simulation hangars. The door clicked shut behind her. Inside the sim chamber, Major Grant was finishing up a session with Lieutenant Burke, a cocky pilot from the East Coast. They were reviewing footage of a successful combat simulation, where Burke's Apache had executed a tight canyon maneuver, firing rockets at an enemy convoy. Wren stood quietly at the edge of the room, waiting. Grant noticed her after a moment. "Can I help you?" he asked, skeptical. She nodded. "Requesting sim time." Grant raised an eyebrow. "You're not on the schedule. You're not even listed as a trainee." "I'm qualified," she said, calm and confident. "That's not what your record says," Grant replied. She didn't answer. She just waited, poised and patient. Grant exchanged a glance with Burke. "What did you say your name was again?" Grant asked. "Wren." She didn't offer a last name. The instructor tilted his head. "You're not Army, are you?" "I was." Grant scoffed. "Right, and I was Elvis." Burke smirked. "Come on, sir. Let's see what the janitor's got." Grant hesitated, then keyed in the console. "Fine. 2 minutes, solo engagement scenario, canyon terrain, 5 hostile targets. No pre-brief. Let's go." Wren stepped into the pod without hesitation. The door hissed shut, and the simulation chamber lit up. Burke leaned toward Grant. Bet she crashes before she hits a target, he whispered. Grant shook his head. She won't even get off the ground. Then the screen lit up. The Apache came alive, not just airborne, but moving with fluid confidence. Ren's every control input was executed with precision, as if she had done this 1,000 times. The terrain sped by at low altitude. 5 red markers appeared on the radar, representing enemy targets. Ren adjusted her altitude, shifted her vector, and dove into a narrow valley, using terrain masking to disappear from radar. Grant's smile faltered. She's using terrain masking, he muttered. Burke frowned. That's a Tier 1 maneuver. Where did she learn that? A missile locked on and fired, a perfect hit. The second and third targets were eliminated with surgical precision. Within 90 seconds, all 5 hostiles were down. The simulation ended. The screen went black. The room fell silent. Ren stepped out of the pod, her expression unchanged, as though nothing remarkable had just happened. Grant stood up straighter. Where exactly did you train? I didn't, she replied, walking past them toward the exit. It was only after she left that Burke noticed the faded black tattoo on her neck, an insignia that only a select few would recognize. Burke's eyes widened. Sir, that's not a civilian. Grant didn't respond, but that night he made a call to someone with stars on their collar. If that mark was real, Ren wasn't just a pilot. She had been part of something far more dangerous, and had kept it hidden for a reason. Under the blazing sun of the New Mexico desert, the hum of machinery echoed through the hangar. Technicians worked under rotor blades and fuselages. Liv was among them, moving with precision. She didn't wear rank, didn't speak much. No one knew how she ended up working in the helicopter hangar. Some assumed she was just a washed-up dropout with a talent for engines. She didn't correct them. Her uniform was standard issue for contractors, navy blue coveralls, unzipped just enough to beat the heat, revealing a faint scar on her collarbone. Her blonde hair was tied back tightly, but a few strands fell loose beneath her cap. Her green eyes were sharp, focused. Every movement was automatic, practiced. But to the soldiers passing by, she was just another mechanic, just another grease monkey. Then the call came over the intercom. A scout team had gone dark near the mountain ridge. The situation was unclear. Communications had failed. With only 2 Apaches available on base, chaos ensued. Colonel Harris stormed into the hangar, his boots echoing on the concrete. Which Apache is closest to flight ready, he demanded. Liv wiped her hands and stepped forward. Tail number 7 Delta's prepped. Needs a systems check, and someone who can handle her weight in this heat. Harris didn't look at her. I asked for a bird, not your opinion. Where's your supervisor? He's off base for 2 days, Liv replied. I'm the senior tech on shift. Not cleared for combat or flight, Harris barked. Just make it ready. I'll find someone to fly it. Liv didn't answer. She returned to the Apache, running through the final systems check herself, hydraulics green, weapons sync green, diagnostics clear. Then she climbed into the cockpit. As she did, her collar shifted slightly, revealing a faded tattoo, a dagger between 2 rotor blades. Staff Sergeant Booth, a logistics man with more deployments than anyone realized, froze. He turned and hurried to Harris's office. Moments later, Harris stormed back out, eyes locking onto Liv like he was seeing her for the first time. What's going on here? Harris demanded. Liv simply met his gaze. You needed a pilot. The bird's ready. Booth whispered in Harris's ear. Harris paled. Is it true? He asked. You flew under Colonel Draper in Taji? Liv didn't answer. She didn't need to. Get in the air, Harris ordered. She's lead on this. Follow her bird. The Apache's rotors whined to life, cutting through the desert air. Liv eased the collective, lifting the Apache into the air with smooth precision. The chase helicopter scrambled to follow. Liv's voice crackled over the comms, "Form on my 6, 2 ship staggered. Radio's silent unless you see muzzle flashes." And just like that, the mission began. "Form on my 6, 2 ship staggered. Radio's silent unless you see muzzle flashes." Liv's voice resonated through the headset, calm but commanding, as the Apache surged forward. The aircraft became an extension of her body, every movement instinctive. The desert below blurred as the Apache sliced through the air at 150 knots. No hesitation. No recalculation. The systems hummed, every display glowing green. The terrain whipped by in a rush of color. She banked left, the Apache slicing between 2 sandstone spires. Ahead, a Humvee lay still, smoke rising from the engine. A few hostile pickups had converged on the site. The convoy was trapped. Command wanted eyes on the situation. Liv had other plans. She wasn't just going to observe, she was going to extract them. At 50 feet above the ground, she weaved between rocky outcrops. Stay low. Use the terrain. SAM teams don't waste missiles on shadows they can't lock, she ordered the pilot trailing her. The terrain stretched before her, a perfect kill zone, but she wasn't going to give the enemy a chance to lock her in. The thermal optics blinked to life. She could see them, 3, maybe 4 enemies moving toward the disabled Humvee. The landing zone was a kill box, perfect for an ambush. But Liv wasn't about to give them the upper hand. With one quick motion, she throttled back, bringing the Apache into position. "Chase 1, orbit high right. Cover my egress." "I'll sweep," Liv commanded. The chase bird responded, now fully in sync with her. She swooped in, dropping the Apache into the valley. Rotor wash shredded the smoke column, scattering the enemy. A man tripped as shells exploded behind him. She swung left and fired, the Apache's cannon barking in controlled bursts. 2 enemies fell, never reaching their cover. "Team Havoc, radio check," Liv said, her voice steady. "Copy, Ghost Knife 2. Kia 1, walking wounded, can't move. Tires shredded. Sit tight." Liv flared the Apache into a hover, just above the ground. The side door opened, and her crew chief jumped out, sprinting toward the Humvee, his movements a blur under the deafening rotor storm. Liv's focus never wavered as she kept her eyes locked on the thermal scope. 2 remaining hostiles scrambled for a machine gun position. Without hesitation, Liv adjusted her aim and squeezed off 3 bursts. The gunner vanished in a cloud of dust and flame. Her crew chief's voice crackled over the radio seconds later. "Package on board. Pop smoke, purple haze downwind." Liv raised the collective and the Apache climbed, its engines roaring as she punched the throttle to max power. The chase bird followed, its cargo bay now carrying a bleeding sergeant. They cleared the mountains in 5 minutes. Radio silence was only broken by the medics' updates. A plume of smoke marked the ambush site, the enemy transport still burning under the afternoon sun. Fort Rains shimmered in the distance like a mirage. Liv throttled back, allowing the chase bird to overtake and land first. Medics sprinted across the pad, and Liv circled once, preparing to land the Apache smoothly. The engines hummed to idle as the dust settled. A crowd gathered around the pad, mechanics, flight officers, even infantrymen who rarely left the barracks. Colonel Harris pushed through them, his helmet tucked under his arm. Liv unstrapped and descended the ladder with boots thudding decisively on the tarmac. Harris stopped 2 paces short. Neither spoke for a moment. His gaze fixed on her neck, the faint edge of the dagger and rotor tattoo streaked with sweat and desert grit. His jaw unclenched. "I flew with a ghost knife once," he said, his voice quiet. "Helmand Province, 2009. They saved my platoon." Liv's eyes met his. "That pilot taught me everything I know," she said calmly. Harris nodded, a slow, measured motion of respect. Murmurs swelled around them, turning into certainty. The mechanic was no mechanic. The quiet woman was no longer anonymous. She had flown into a live engagement, extracted a pinned-down unit, and brought them home without a single friendly casualty. Harris drew a breath, his voice carrying across the crowd. From this moment, Captain Reynolds is reinstated to flight status and assigned lead on Apache operations. Anyone with objections can take it up with me. His gaze swept over the onlookers. None spoke. Liv exhaled, the weight of years lifting off her shoulders. She glanced at the Apache, dusty, scarred, still humming with residual heat. She reached up and ran a gloved hand along its fuselage. The machine had given her wings again, and she had given it purpose. Behind her, turbines roared as another Apache taxied. The base returned to motion, but in that narrow pocket of stillness around the landing pad, respect settled like evening dew. The doubters had seen enough. The silence now carried a different tone, one of acknowledgement, even gratitude. Liv turned toward the hangar, flight helmet under her arm, ready for debrief, ready for whatever mission followed. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The sky was open again, and everyone on base understood one simple truth: skill doesn't fade, and legends never stay grounded for long. It started with one question, the kind you ask without thinking. "Ma'am," Corporal Diaz said, jogging up as Liv was halfway back to her hangar. "How did you know the vibration frequency just from hearing it?" Liv turned slowly, her green eyes locking onto him for a second, like she was calculating something. "It's not just hearing," she said. "It's familiar." Diaz laughed lightly. "You sure you weren't military once?" She didn't laugh back. Didn't say anything. Just tapped the wrench in her hand twice against her thigh. Back inside the hangar, Liv closed the rolling door. Alone again, her hands trembled, not from fear, but from memory. She reached for her toolkit, but her eyes drifted to the locker in the far corner, the one with the reinforced lock. The one she hadn't opened in nearly 8 years. Outside, things were escalating. The colonel had arrived, tall, broad-shouldered, an old-school pilot who valued rank more than intuition. He stepped onto the tarmac with a scowl carved into his face. "Someone said the mechanic overrode the diagnostics," he barked. "She didn't override, sir," Diaz replied. "She corrected it, saved the bird, actually." The colonel didn't like that. He marched straight into the hangar, pushing open the door. "Liv," he called. She was waiting, calm, straight-backed. Something was different about her stance, less civilian, more something else. "Sir," she said flatly. "I heard you disarmed the lockout. Who authorized it?" "I did." "You don't have that authority." Liv paused, then walked forward and said something low, controlled. "Your checklist would have cooked the turbine. Ask your tech chief if you don't believe me." The colonel stared at her, stunned. "Excuse me? I wrote that checklist 12 years ago." Liv stepped aside and handed him a sealed folder, worn, with corners folded but the insignia still visible, a classified ops division, no longer active. Inside were her original D-214 and a second document from a CIA contractor program. "Your ghost pilot, K-93. She nodded once. "That's not possible. K-93 vanished in 2017. Liv lifted the collar of her shirt, revealing a small tattoo just below her neck, a stylized raven, wings folded. The colonel stepped back, stunned. "Of course not," he muttered. "She wasn't supposed to exist." Liv turned back to him. "Why am I here?" "Because someone has to keep these birds flying." A long silence hung in the air before the sound of distant rotors broke the stillness, fast and urgent. An Apache gunship and a training operation had just taken an unexpected hit. Fire had damaged its tail, and a mayday call came in over the radio. They needed emergency landing clearance. The problem was, every available pilot was either grounded or stuck in simulations. No one was in the air. The only Apache that hadn't been stripped for parts was the one Liv had personally rebuilt. She looked at the colonel, meeting his eyes. "Let me fly it." The colonel hesitated. "You're not cleared." "Neither is that bird," she replied, her voice steady and confident. "But I'm the only one who knows how she breathes." He stared at her for a moment, weighing her words, then silently handed her the helmet. The hangar doors creaked open, and for the first time in nearly a decade, Ghost Pilot K-93 walked toward the Apache she had rebuilt from memory. The base watched in a quiet, stunned silence. The next moment would change everything. The desert heat enveloped her as the Apache's engines idled low behind her. The rotors sliced through the air, cutting the silence like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Captain Jensen stood frozen near the hangar, mouth slightly open, his radio forgotten in his hand. What he was witnessing defied every protocol, every assumption he had made about the quiet mechanic, Eden Vale. Eden climbed into the cockpit slowly, not arrogantly, but with purpose, like this was just another routine flight, like she belonged there. Around her, everything shifted. The other pilots, Lieutenant Morris, Jenkins, T.R., who had rolled their eyes just 20 minutes earlier when she warned them about the mechanical fault, now stared at her as though they were seeing her for the first time. None of them spoke. No one dared to break the stillness. The Apache hit the concrete with a final thud as it powered down. Colonel Hargrave, who had been observing from the control tower, strode across the tarmac with the kind of precision that said he wasn't there to ask questions. 2 MPs trailed behind him, but it was clear they weren't there to detain her. Hargrave walked straight up to Eden, stopping just short of her. He studied her for a moment, and then, without hesitation, spoke. "You could have let him crash," he said, his voice low but filled with a quiet respect. "You could have let them ignore you." Eden didn't respond right away. She glanced past him, her eyes catching the crew behind them, still stunned by the turn of events. "I don't do this for them," she said quietly. "I do it for the ones who need me to do it. That pilot, he would have died out there. I wasn't going to watch it happen again." "Again?" the colonel asked. Her hand moved slowly to brush back her hair, exposing the tattoo on her neck, the unmistakable ink of the ghosts of Anaconda. A unit once believed to be disbanded, erased from history, buried under classified redactions. Eden didn't flinch. The colonel froze, his eyes locking onto the mark. He stepped back. "You flew with the 109th, he muttered, barely able to believe it. "They said the whole unit was lost." Eden finished the thought. "They were, except me." Behind them, someone whispered, "Ghost of Anaconda." And in that moment, everything changed. The silence cracked like pressure being released from a sealed chamber. The air was thick with murmurs, some filled with awe, others with apology, and many with disbelief. Captain Jensen stood motionless, his face drained of color. His pride, shattered in an instant. "Is it true?" someone asked, voice shaky. "You took down a convoy in Kabul with no radar, no escort." Eden didn't answer. She didn't need to. The colonel raised his hand, signaling for silence. "Captain Jensen," he barked, his voice sharp. "Effective immediately, you're relieved of command, pending review." The reaction was instantaneous, no protest, no objections. The crew dispersed, showing silent respect. Eden turned to walk back to the hangar, but Hargrave wasn't done yet. "Vale," he called. Eden paused and turned to him, waiting. "We need pilots. Real ones. The kind that don't crack under pressure," he said, his tone softer. "You're wasted under a wrench." She met his gaze, eyes fierce with quiet intensity. "I don't fly for glory, sir." "You don't have to," he replied. "Just fly. They need you." Eden didn't answer, but her silence was enough. The promise had been made, and she was ready for whatever came next. Weeks passed, and the base returned to its normal rhythm. But something had changed. A new name whispered through the hangars, passed from one recruit to the next like a myth made real. It wasn't Eden Vale anymore. It was Echo. The call sign reinstated by the Pentagon. A name once buried in redacted documents and classified after-action reports, now a legend. Eden didn't ask for a ceremony. She didn't wear the new wings they gave her. She hardly showed up at morning briefings unless she had something to say. But no one questioned her anymore. When she spoke, everyone listened. The tattoo on her neck, once hidden beneath grease and hair, was now always visible. She didn't cover it up, not because she needed to prove anything, but because she no longer had to hide. That was the difference. She hadn't changed. They had. One morning, a group of cocky young pilots stood outside the simulator building, filled with stories they hadn't earned. One of them, Lieutenant Corwin, turned to Eden as she passed by, her clipboard in hand, grease streaking her sleeves. "You here to clean the vents, ma'am?" he asked with a smirk. Eden stopped for a second, locking eyes with him. Then, in her calm, steady voice, she said just 4 words. "See you in airspace." 20 minutes later, when Corwin entered the simulator, his confidence had evaporated. He saw Echo 1 pop up beside his name on the combat roster. In the simulation, he couldn't get past Phase 2. Eden, however, did the impossible again: perfect maneuvers under fire, a flawless extraction, and a kill ratio that defied expectations. And she did it all with one engine compromised. As Corwin exited the building, pale and quiet, Eden passed by again, tossing a rag over her shoulder. She didn't need to say anything. The old colonel leaned against the railing, coffee in hand, watching the young lieutenant. "Next time you see a mechanic," he said quietly, "look at their hands. Scars like that don't come from fixing helicopters. They come from saving lives." That evening, Eden stood alone on the tarmac, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Her Apache sat still under the fading light. She didn't climb in. She just stood there, breathing in the quiet. Then, a figure approached, a civilian in his mid-30s, no insignia. Eden tensed, instinctively. He smiled faintly. "Didn't think I'd find you here," he said. Eden didn't turn. "Took you long enough. I wasn't sure you were real until I saw the report." She exhaled slowly. "I thought you died in Kandahar." "I almost did. You got me out." She turned slightly, meeting his eyes, hers shimmering in the twilight. "You saved me," he said. "Now I work for the ones who almost forgot you. I made sure they won't forget again." Eden looked away, toward the line of jets in the distance. "You still fly?" "Only when I have to," he replied. After a moment, he added, "which is always." He didn't ask more. He nodded and walked away. Eden remained alone on the tarmac, not because she had something to prove, but because someone might need her. And when they did, she would be ready. This story deeply resonates with me because it highlights the often overlooked power of quiet strength and hidden talents. So often, society places value on titles, positions, and visible achievements, forgetting that real impact often comes from those who work in the shadows. Eden's journey is a beautiful reminder that true power doesn't need to be flaunted. She didn't seek recognition or glory, instead, she showed up when it mattered most. This is a call to acknowledge those around us who may not fit the typical mold of success but have abilities and knowledge that can change the course of events when needed. It's a powerful message to stop judging based on appearances and titles and to value the quiet, unassuming warriors who silently carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. It's a truth we all need to internalize more. Thanks for joining us on this intense ride. If it resonated, hit subscribe, ring the bell, don't miss out. Here's to the silent sacrifices, together, we're unstoppable. See you next time.